all that being said, it's going to be a good conversation today, but I'm going to start off with a surprise question to both of them that they're not aware of. So I'm unmuting them and I'm bringing them up, and then I'm going to ask my two important questions, and then we'll start the conversations. Clay, Eric, how you doing?
Good, Glenn. How are you? Hey, Clay.
Okay, here's my two important questions to both of you before we start talking about Texas processes, what's the conservative party looking like, Hunter Biden, the media, all these different topics that Eric cut us off and said, we're having a great conversation. Start the stupid show. And that's how he said it, too. He said it really angrily like that.
Hey, you're the one that came up with the name during the break for your other show. You thought you would have learned your lesson by now.
Dude, you know me a long time. When have I ever learned a lesson? Come on now. So listen, here's the quick question for both of you. Clay, I'll go to you first. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Absolutely.
Okay. Eric Buchanan, is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It's the best Christmas movie.
Okay.
So there are two right answers. It's either Die Hard is a Christmas movie or you're wrong. That's it. I mean.
All right, Clay, fake tree or real tree?
I love real trees, but I got to go fake. I lit off a real one back in 1995, 96. One time I came home, took it out in the front yard and burned it. And let me tell you something, brother. That thing, I'm sorry. I lost you. Hang on.
Yeah, it's okay. We can hear you.
Okay. That thing went up in a matter of 1 to 3 seconds. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't think I could ever have another one in my house after I saw that.
Eric, real or fake?
I have a rule. If you have kids, it's a real tree. Once kids are out of the house, it's okay to have the fake tree year after year after year. I also, by the way, have an important caveat to Christmas trees that you should not buy one or put one up until late in December, because Christmas does not actually start until December 25th and it goes until January 6th. That's the 12 days of Christmas. If you take down your Christmas tree before January 6th, the 12th day of Christmas, then you are a Scrooge, Grinch, bah, humbug, butthead.
Well, what if you put it up December 1st and leave it up through the end of February like I do?
That's wrong. You're not supposed to do that. The Christmas doesn't start till December 25th, 12 days of Christmas. Don't take the damn Christmas tree down during the 12 days of Christmas.
Look at you dropping cuss words about Christmas trees. Get your priorities together.
Wow.
Communist. All right. Hey, here we go. Now, Eric, you and I did a special broadcast last Thursday because when you called me up Wednesday night, the Texas lawsuit had been filed for a couple of days. Other states were joining in. You had Republican Congress folks jumping on and saying, "Hey, or the House jumping on saying we're going to support this." It got shut down with I think it was 2 sentences or 1 sentence. Basically, the Supreme Court said, nope, no standing. Texas has no standing. I think that was the words that they used. I don't know what that means, except it was a no. So why don't we start with the Texas lawsuit conversation, and then we'll segue and move through the rest of the topics. Eric, give everybody, if you can, a thumbnail of what it was supposed to be, and then why do you think it got so easily just dismissed?
Basic law school lesson about what the Constitution says about lawsuits. There has to be an actual case in controversy, and part of the multiple parts to whether you have a case of controversy is you have to have a real dispute between real people who disagree with each other, whether it's parties, states, individuals. And so if Clay and I are mad at each other and I run him over with a car and I stomp on his foot, you can't sue me as somebody who's going to say, well, I saw Clay get hurt and Eric might do it to me next. I haven't hurt you yet. I haven't affected you yet. Clay can sue me and try to get damages for his hurt foot. He's the one who has, quote, standing to sue because he's the injured party. And there's a whole lot of technical mumbo jumbo, but what it basically comes down to is the Supreme Court decided very quickly, summarily, that Texas or any other state does not have standing to complain about what happens in the election inside another state because the voters in Texas still had their process. The voters in the other 7 states that sued still had their process under the Constitution. I've read some very interesting articles that explain why the Supreme Court was wrong, and I think there's some good legal arguments why the Supreme Court was wrong. But that's what the Supreme Court said, is that Texas can worry about how people get to vote in Texas, but they don't have standing to vote to complain about how people get to vote in Georgia. Now, who might actually have standing? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. How about the Republican electors in Georgia, who are the ones that actually can no longer vote today because today is the day the Electoral College meets. They're sued. They're the ones who filed the lawsuit technically in Georgia. They're the ones who actually lost their vote, so they have standing. I think that's going to be a pretty easy question. The question is what happens to the rest of that lawsuit, and the fact that the Electoral College is meeting today probably makes the big question that we need to face as Americans. It's a lot harder for anything to get changed at this point in this election, but how do we make sure that this kind of insanity doesn't happen again going forward? How do we ensure that people have faith in elections, and how do we, as conservatives, make sure that we have a fair chance and we can actually win if our ideas are the ones that most people support?
Clay, you got anything you want to add before I ask some questions?
It'll be 2 generations before people have faith in elections again. What happened in 2016 and the Russian collusion hoax that was perpetuated by people who knew it was a hoax, perpetuated it ongoing for 4 or more years without understanding of the harm it does to 30 to 40, maybe 50% of Americans. Then when you see something like, whether it doesn't really matter if somebody cheated or not this time, it doesn't matter. Most of Americans do not believe that their elections are free and fair anymore. And I don't think that's something that you can fix in 4 years. And more importantly, I don't think that the people at the top in government have any interest. I think they just plain don't give a damn whether you think it's fair or not. As long as they stay in power, they don't care. And I think I think the damage done could be at least 1 to 2 generations before people believe that their vote counts anymore.
And that's with a lot of hard work to fix it between now and then.
Well,
If we keep going down the same path, we may have just crossed the Rubicon in the United States. And for those who are not history majors, that's when Caesar brought his army back to Rome that started his takeover. And after being a republic for nearly 500 years, Rome became an empire. And instead of having elections of senators and consuls, it became an empire where the emperor was picked through less than democratic means. Is that what just happened in America? I think that's a fair discussion. But I think more importantly than digging into the specifics of the allegations of fraud, which I think is worth a show, I think we should talk about what happened that everybody can agree on. What's happened with the process rules? What's happened with the way the votes were counted, and how weird the outcome was, and what the Republicans can do about it going forward if they don't want to keep losing. Newt Gingrich said something really important the other day about this upcoming Senate raid in Georgia, which is similar to what Trump was saying before. The new rules of the game are the Republicans have to win by so much that they win by enough to overcome the fraud.
Yeah, well, we have people, and I know it's happened. You had Gore and Bush, but there are people that have air quote won or lost elections that have really spent the remainder of every year after that claiming they either won, or they were, it was stolen. I mean, Trump, this happening to this degree is a little unique, but Trump saying that I don't think the election was fair is not something that is new to the debate, to the dialogue in amongst us all. I mean, Stacey Abrams says she was the governor of California and it was stolen from her. Georgia, yeah, because I've got written down from California. I want to talk about people moving into Georgia too recently, from what I understand, to help with the election. But she was, the governor of Georgia. You have people, Hillary Clinton went around forever saying that the election was won by, because of Russia. Come to find out that Russia had nothing to do with anything really, except $100,000 worth of Facebook ads. And then you just have this thing now where if we don't win, the rule of law must have not been in our favor. In other words, it's impossible for anybody now to win or lose based off the merits of their arguments. If you don't agree with us, it's because you're either a racist or label here, or you stole it from us. And I'm not saying that the Democrats or Republicans, I'm not trying to place blame. It just, that conversation, it's going on for so long and ramping up into how loud it is. I don't see one party over another talking about how to get the election trust back. I don't see a plan in place for that. As a matter of fact, I see a lot of fear. If we lose, here's what I hear. If we lose the Senate, You're going to have new states added. You're going to have packing the Supreme Court. You're going to have A, B, C, and D. We're going to get rid of the filibuster.
Don't forget gun confiscation. That's the one that scares me to my core. That's coming.
Well, it might be these things that are supposed to have some rule of law and ways to get through it. And I hear thrown out in there like seasoning on the meal. These are the big things that we're going to do to they've said it, to fundamentally change the way the country operates. Well, the problem with that is when you start removing those barriers, I'm worried. You said, Eric, and maybe America has crossed a threshold that if we don't really over the next 24 months take a stand on and guard, I don't know what it's going to look like.
I think that's one reason why I'm glad we're doing these casts, these shows. It's time for Americans to pay attention and not just sit back and trust that our leaders are actually acting responsibly. You asked a great question. Who's working to fix these election problems? And I think it needs to be the Republicans that are going to pay more attention to it. Florida, for example, did a great job after 2000 cleaning up their elections, and they're very trustworthy. One concern is if you're the winning party, if you're winning under the process we have now, why would you try to, quote, fix anything? And that's one of the problems we're going to have going forward, is that the Democrats are not interested in fixing it because the questionable system, and we need to have a separate conversation between fraud and just the rules changes that allowed certain things to happen. But the way, even just the way the rules work now, even without any fraud, and we can have a big conversation about fraud, but even with just the rules change now, the Democrats have really dramatically changed the playing field. And they have no interest in fixing it. Why would they? They're winning. Well,
and I think that, one of the words I've used is manipulated. They've manipulated the rules around it. And I think a lot of those rules, especially after talking with you, Eric, and reading some of these articles, the rules that they've manipulated circumnavigated the law and the process. And that's where people's heads start to kind of explode, because we look around going, I didn't think it was supposed to be operating that way. And the rules get changed. Rules and the laws really may not get changed, but the rules did.
I don't want to do all the talking. I want Clay to jump in here, but let me just cover this one specific thing. The issue that Texas raised that I think is a legitimate constitutional issue, that the electors who have filed lawsuits in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, maybe also in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure, that they legitimately are raising as a question, is that the Constitution gives the authority to decide how each state picks its electors for the Electoral College to the legislator of that state. So if the legislator of a state has a rule, for example, that we only count mail-in votes or absentee votes that arrive by election day, that's the state law in Pennsylvania, for example. If that's the state law, and then somebody comes along and says, wait a minute, we got a pandemic going on, people are afraid to get out to vote, we were going to have more mail-in ballots, Trump's trying to destroy the post office, oh my gosh, we have an emergency, let's set our hair on fire and scream and yell, and let's go sue in the state of Pennsylvania, I keep saying state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to get the rule changed to allow votes to come in for up to a week after the election. And they don't even have to be postmarked by election day, arguably. And this is an emergency rule. And then when somebody sues to say we have to change the rule, the election commission goes, oh my gosh, we're getting sued. We give up, we surrender. We'll just change the rule and enter into a settlement agreement. The Pennsylvania legislature did not change those rules. In some places, the court didn't even change the rules. It was done by the election commission, an administrative agency, and they changed the rules in a way that was unconstitutional. And the result arguably was, because what we're hearing from the left, the reason why all this funny vote counting happened after the election and why numbers changed from Trump to Biden so dramatically was all these mail-in votes. Well, if you take them at their word, all these mail-in votes came in, changed the election. Well, why did so many count in a way that shouldn't have counted before? Because the rules were changed, and the rules were changed in a way that's unconstitutional, because the rules were not changed by the state legislature. They were changed by somebody else at the last minute, usually involving courts or at least friendly people in the election commissions. And that's what Texas was saying was done wrong. The problem the Supreme Court said was, well, Texas doesn't have the right under our case and controversy rules under the Constitution to be the one complaining, because it wasn't their voters who didn't get to pick their electors in accordance with the Constitution. They don't have standing to complain on behalf of Georgia or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania's voters or electors.
Well, and Clay, I got a question specifically for you in a minute because it's going to tie all this in, how it brings it back to our responsibility. But we talked about this on Thursday, Eric, as a common person. I don't have near the depth of knowledge you do, but it seems to me that if you're going to do something in one state on a federal election level that is unconstitutional and gives advantages to a one party over the other, then that does in a way diminish or invalidate my vote on a federal level, because all of a sudden you are giving more weight to another party based off unlevel playing field. And I don't understand how that's hard for people to understand. And real quick, shout out to people who disagree with me or with, on anything. If you're different political stance, you should want to figure that out too, because if by some chance some other party ever got the power that's not agreement with you, that's outside your party, you don't want them to go around changing the rules so you don't get a fair vote either. And if you think that's okay now because it's our turn politics, you're part of the problem. And I'm okay with you hitting the unfriend button. I don't unfriend anybody ever. I unfriend people if they're mean to folks, like nasty, but I've never really unfriended anybody. So Clay, here's my question for you. What Eric was saying a minute ago when we asked was, how do we change it? Who's looking at it? I trust both of you guys to give me some examples or to put a plan and help talk about a plan that a party could put in place. But doesn't it kind of start how we look at each other, Clay? Because me and you and Eric were talking about the social media component or even the worldview component. We look at the other party now as a society. I'm not saying I do, but as the opposition. It's not just we disagree, but I've got to beat you at all costs. My team's always got to be right. And if we win at the win by any means necessary, that's a very dangerous place for if me and Clay disagree. If my only goal is to beat you and not to actually have an idea, debate on ideas, that's dangerous, isn't it?
I think the word is compromise. I'm okay with compromising with people who think differently. I don't want, I think we proved that when Trump won the presidency, the Republicans owned the House or held the House, the Senate and the White House, and they were able to get absolutely nothing done with regard to Obamacare, which was what they had ran on. And McCain saw to that, although it never should have come down to just that one.
Right.
So I think that was I think that really woke me up. And I think it woke a lot of conservatives up, that it's just about getting into power. We don't have the option to hire good, solid, trustworthy people. And the people that are there now care nothing about Americans. I mean, they just don't. They can't. They're so isolated from people who make $8, $12, $18 an hour. They're so isolated that they have no idea what life is really like for most Americans. And so I would welcome good arguments or good discussions where I may not get everything I want, but that gun confiscation, for an example, is a no. We're not talking about it. You're not going to get it. So tell me what else that you would like, and we'll work some things out together.
Well, and real quick though, Clay, on that topic, if you've done a lot of negotiations, so have I. If somebody says we want to confiscate the guns, I think the questions after that, okay, well, let's talk about your why. Why do you want to confiscate the guns? What are the consequences? And then let them lay out, these are the reasons why. And maybe there's other things that we can find a way to help with those consequences, right? It doesn't have to be, this is the only solution to this issue. Maybe there's family issues, mental health issues, access issues. There's other things that go into that big, complicated problem.
Yes. When it comes to mental health issues or court subject cases, like abuse cases, I don't have a problem with any of that. But see, all of those things exist now. Okay, they exist now. The concept, the idea that additional gun laws will matter stands up the idea that gun laws don't work. Okay, if you have gun laws in place and they're not giving you what you want in the end, adding additional gun laws actually proves the fact that gun laws don't work.
Yeah.
Okay. What you need to do is you have mandatory sentencing. If you were involved in a crime with a gun, all right, and I'm just throwing this out as just an arbitrary idea.
Yeah.
It cannot be pled down. I don't care if you're 13 years old. It cannot be pled down. If you were in violation, or if you are a felon with a gun, you are automatic. If you steal a gun, if you're involved in robbing a car and you steal a gun out of that car, or you have a gun in your possession at the time, you're going away for 25 years, period. 15, 7, whatever it may be. But the problem is we plead down everything. We plead down to where there's no punishment. So we have all these laws, and then nobody's really to enforce them.
Well, and two, it's human
so
beings.
Additional laws doesn't matter.
Well, and human beings, we make everything so damn complicated. It can't just be this, and this equals this. It's this, and this. And how about this? Just life is nuanced. I get it. And Monica Perez, my friend off the Propaganda Report podcast, would agree with you a lot on the get rid of the plea bargain. She goes, you have a right to go before a jury. And then once they come up with the verdict, then the sentencing part of it could happen. She hates plea bargains. She can't stand it. She thinks it's crazy. Eric, I want to pull it back a little bit and say something to you and let you just take it and run with it if you want to. I've heard a very good friend of mine say that President Trump lost bigly. And I just heard that a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and weirdly, I've heard that from two liberal friends that I keep up with on social media. Any conversation about let's examine what happened with this election, whether it was fraud or process or both, none of that matters. You need to shut up. There's a temper tantrum going on. Trump is trying to commit a coup. He's trying to overturn a valid election. All those arguments basically amount to shut up. You're not allowed to even talk about it. He won bigly. And that word bigly has started popping up in liberal talking points of there's no point in talking. Even you and I have a mutual friend whose initials are Jeff Styles, who said this on his radio show.
Are you calling out Jeff Styles?
As a matter of fact, I am. That Trump has nothing to stand on because he's got to overturn something like, at the time, 5 million votes. Well, it turns out he actually lost by 7 million votes. But let's talk about the numbers very quickly. And I think this is important. So the United States doesn't use a popular election. Trump didn't win by a popular election last time. He did lose by, now that the numbers are in, as of today, I looked it up, about 7 million votes. Okay, that sounds like he lost bigly. Now remember, first of all, the biggest ever election before this one, 130 million people voted. This time we had 155 million because we had so many mail-in ballots. We went from 33 million to 80 million. 80 million, more than half the people who voted by mail this time. And Trump, yes, he lost by 7 million votes in the national election, but we don't decide by the national election. And where do you break that down? California, where they sent a mail-in ballot to every single citizen, something like 20 million ballots were sent out. In California, they had over 17 million ballots cast, and Trump lost by 5,143,000. In New York, where they sent out a lot of mail-in ballots, the total vote count was 8.5 million, and Trump lost by 1.89. Well, if you add those two together, what he lost by in California and what he lost by in New York, that is more than the difference of 7,050,000 that he lost in the whole United States. So if you throw out those two states, and yeah, there's a lot of electoral votes in those two states, but if you throw out those two states, what he was going to lose anyway, there was no way he was going to win those states. He actually won the majority in all the rest of the states. Now, how's that actually going to work out? Well, it works out to be so close. The states that were in play until today when the Electoral College meets, and there's still some lawsuits going on, and I don't want to get into some of those allegations of voter fraud, but just from a standpoint of what actually happened in this election, the biggest loss of any of the states that were still in play was in Michigan. He lost by 155,000. He lost by 80,000 in Pennsylvania, which he was winning huge toward the end.
He was winning hugely.
Yeah, hugely. He was winning hugely. He didn't lose bigly in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, he lost by 80,000. And then the other three, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Wisconsin, he lost by 20,682. Georgia, 11,779. In Arizona, 10,456. So just in round numbers, he lost Wisconsin by less than 21,000. He lost Georgia by less than 12,000. He lost Arizona by less than 11,000. And then Pennsylvania by 80,000 with all the weirdness of the covered up windows and all those mail-in ballots coming in after the date and the changes in the election rules and the Democrats themselves explaining the weirdness in the vote tallies is all because of mail-in ballots, but you're not allowed to go back and ask questions about which mail-in ballots they counted. And then one of the other interesting statistics is when you do mail-in ballots, bad stuff happens. We've never done this kind of mail-in ballots before. So there's all these questions about how do you verify those ballots? How do you check the signatures? And Georgia went from having a 6% rejection rate. In other words, 6 out of every 100 mail-in ballots or absentee ballots in Georgia in the last election were thrown out because they had a problem. This time it was only 0.5%. So the rules not only changed to allow for more mail-in balloting, but the rules also changed to allow for ballots to count more easily. And then there's the whole question of how they were actually counted. Once they got in, the vote got pulled out of the envelope, there's no way to go back and audit to make sure that it actually had a proper postmark because the ballot, once it's put in the stack of an accepted,
separated,
it's been separated. So it got put in that pile as a counted vote. So at the end of the day, when you say that Trump lost bigly, yeah, he lost bigly in California and New York, which he was going to lose anyway. But in the 5 states that are really kind of this is where the election was decided, he lost by 280,000 votes. And the questions about mail-in ballots and how reliable are they is more than 280,000 votes.
I'm going to let y'all talk for 1 second. Keep going over those numbers. I'll be right back.
Absolutely. So, Clay, let me throw this out to you as well. Have you heard some of the other stuff that's, without getting into the actual fraud, just wasn't what doesn't make sense in this election?
Well, I think it actually does make sense. If you look at it from a slightly different lens, okay, you had a variety of different people all on the same party that were doing something similar in different states, all right? Creating chaos was an objective. Now, I'm not saying they were. I'm just saying if you're looking from that standpoint, that's the only thing that really makes sense. You have the Attorney General of Pennsylvania who publicly says that one candidate is not going to win before election day was finished. When you have an Attorney General who represents all of the people of Pennsylvania who says, Trump, you have no chance of winning this election. There's only one thing that can do is that it causes fear, I would say, but it causes confusion and it causes an opportunity for people to say, what's he doing? Wait, in my mind, there is no way that you change that many rules in that many states to allow for that much change unless your objective is confusion, and fraud can be involved in that, but we're going to call it confusion. And I think that was their goal all along, was to create a mass hysteria, so to speak, or a mass change that we just, I mean, good Lord, we can build a $4.5 billion aircraft carrier where every little nut and screw and bolt and wire and everything, you see where I'm going with this? But we can't, after this many years, we can't get an election. We can't come up with a standardized election principle and rule book that says this is the way it works. If you want to change it, you have to change it 1 year prior. You know, how can we get to that point? We can't even count the number of people in the United States.
Well, and I might have missed it. So I just want to throw this in here because before we move on, I find it disheartening when people say, if you ask a question, you're not a patriot, there's a coup, all the stuff that you mentioned, Eric. I find it disheartening when my fellow Americans and my friends say, if we question it, we are the problem by inspecting the election process itself, because they have questioned it for 4 years. And we've spent, if you talk about Ukraine and Russia, we have spent probably close to 50 million or more on all of these things that ended up either not getting what they wanted, or we found out some of it was just completely made up. And I find it disheartening that when we question something, we're all of a sudden castigated into this realm of we're unpatriotic, especially when you have this. water lines that didn't break, so we had to stop counting votes. We're just going to stop counting arbitrarily like we've never done. Why? Because there's these mail-in ballots. Oh, and by the way, the mail-in ballots disregard rate is
And you
lower
know that
than
water line didn't
ever
break,
been.
right?
That's what I'm saying. Water lines that didn't break.
Toilet
Yeah.
overflowed.
Well, and then and to be honest with you, then if you go back a month, 2 months prior and just look up what the media was saying about the election, the media and politicians on the other side were saying that Trump was going to steal the election. Trump is not going to leave. There's fraud in place. The election machines could be. They were saying the exact same things until their side won. And now it's all of a sudden we shouldn't ask questions. My thing is, as Americans, Republican or Democrat, why is investigating and making sure the processes, why is that a bad thing? I don't understand that.
It's not, but you don't owe your friends, and I'm saying friends, I guess based on the conversation we've had previously.
Yeah.
You don't owe them that. Okay? When they say, "Oh, you don't get to do this," and you give your friends' opinions way more validity than I do.
Right.
This is the way that I'm a free man. I was born that way, and I'm going to die that way. All right. If you don't like my politics, I'm okay with that. I don't have to like yours either, but I can like you. I can believe, I can work with you. I can do these things, but I don't owe you an explanation for anything that I see wrong.
But it is disappointing though that, Eric,
I get that.
No, but here's why I wanted to say it and bring it back to this, because I wrote it down before we came on. Eric, you wanted to talk about things we can agree on or that we have agreed on, and I'm trying to move the conversation forward so we can hit some other topics. But that to me, I think is that's the starting place, in my opinion, on the election process. As Americans, we should all go, yes, we want to make sure our process is fair and consistent, right? That should be where we start from.
So Clint, let's start from that premise. And if your friends are saying you can't ask questions now, you shouldn't be asking questions now, ask them, why do they want to stop the questions? What are they trying to hide? And the answer is they are no longer interested in fair elections. They're no longer interested in the truth. They're no longer interested in how we can ensure that America remains a rule of law country with fair elections going forward. Their goal is to ensure that an election that they change the process in, that the Democrats change the process for to give them a better chance to win, even without any fraud, goes undisturbed and that people don't question it. It is no longer a debate of ideas. It's a debate of one half of us saying, here's the ideas, here's the rules, here's the objective truth, here's the questions that we should be asking, and the other side saying, shut up, we won. And by the way, if you argue about it, mainstream media, YouTube is going to take down what you have to say about it because, oh my gosh, we're so interested in honest truth that we're willing to shut you up. It's no longer about an honest debate. They want to shut up the debate. And if they're on the side of shutting up the debate, I don't care what they think. They're now the enemy. They're now the bad guys. If you want to have an honest debate, I'll have an honest debate with you. You want to talk about facts and figures and numbers and statistics, we'll have that conversation. If you're telling me I'm not allowed to ask those questions, then you're not an American anymore. You have become a traitor to your country, because what Americans do is ask tough questions and follow up on those hard questions. And we come to the truth and fairness for everybody. And by God, if you're going to tell me I'm not allowed to talk about it, then get the hell out of my country. I'm sick and tired of people telling me that you're not allowed to ask these hard questions, because they give up on the American way and the American belief of truth and honesty and justice and fairness. They're no longer on our side as Americans.
Well, and go ahead, Clay. I'm sorry.
Here's a question for you that I want you to consider when you can use this. I've used this in several situations of debate, we'll say. When someone says, well, I don't think we should do this, and I don't think, if they start with, I don't think, or I don't feel, it's not that I don't care. I just don't care. Okay. Do we have the right or do we not? So here's the example that I used. Okay. Did Rosa Parks have to sit in the front of that bus? Did she have to sit? No, but she had the right to do it, and that's enough. Okay. So I don't care whether the bus driver at the time thought she was wrong or thought she was right. She had the right to do it, and she did it. And that's the same type of thing I'm trying to relay here. It's something as simple as riding in the front of the bus led to something so much bigger a generation later. I have the right to ask questions. And if you don't like those questions, I don't care. You know, I lived 50 years without being somebody's friend on Facebook. I'm just guessing that I can make another 30 out of it.
No, you can't. It'll crush
Okay.
your spirit and your
But
soul.
that's
Dude.
what the whole thing comes down to. And when you talk about gun confiscation, I know I need to bail out of here in a few minutes, but with gun confiscation, those rights were granted to us by God, not by the government. You know, okay, the Second Amendment does not guarantee me the right to protect me and my family. The Second Amendment limits my government's ability to step in and make changes to my God-given rights. I can't even tell you how many police officers I've talked to, including my own brother, who said, "Look, there's no way I'm knocking on somebody's door and trying to take someone's gun based on a new law if you haven't done anything wrong." Now, if you've been, you know, if a judge has ruled that you're a danger to society, those are the types of things that cops get paid to do. I mean, it's horrible. But this whole idea of you can't do this and you can't have more than 3 guns and you can't have 20-round magazines, it's telling you, man, there is absolutely no way. And if you do think it's going to happen, it'll never happen in 4 years' time. It'll never happen.
And I want to just throw this out there, and whenever you have to bail, Clay, that's fine. Eric, me and you can kind of keep going for a little while. But going back to this election and how we're going to find common ground, I think it's important for people to put aside it's our turn now politics. You guys lost, right? You lost bigly, so shut up. Because if you stop and think about it, in a certain way, we lost if Biden's the president, the presidential office was lost, but the debate on ideas was not lost. As a matter of fact, the Democrats lost seats in the House. Depending on how the Senate goes, we could keep control of the Senate. Local races went on, and if you listen to the media, everything is groundbreaking when Biden does it. But President Trump over the last 4 years has done more for the minority job rates, has done more for the women job rates. He's had an all-women, a female media department, I think, or, the thing that they're given. We talked about the media fraud earlier. So when you look at the media and how they position this, you lost bigly. The presidential election is going to come and go. He's only 8 years, even if you win 2 terms. But the ideas and the principles should kind of be the consistent thing. And it looks to me like America pushed back on the socialist far left agenda. Would either one of you agree or want to comment on that part of it?
Yeah, let me say this real quickly because I do need to run, and I'm so sorry. I have another appointment I have to make. I think that is one of the caveats of this election. If you look at that, look at the number of Republican women across the United States, look at the number of congressional people in California that is now Republican. Was it 5 or 6 different seats that they flipped? When you look at things across the nation, this was not. There was a word that they used when Trump was this was not a directive on Trump by any means. There's something here that doesn't add up. And if Biden's the president, then Biden's the president. But he better realize that he's not. Well, first off, I don't think he's going to stay in office very long anyway. I think Kamala's going to make sure of that. But I heard that she bought him a dog or something like that. But America's never going to unite under the current conditions. You're going to have people who trust each other and actually look out for Americans as a whole. Well, those people are not in Washington, D.C. and they haven't been in a long time.
How do you unite under the flag of we won, shut up, take it, and here's our new policies? And I get that. And the thing about Trump supporters or Republicans the last 4 years, we may not like this. And Clay, I know, and I'm not saying you did it or Eric, you've done it, or I know I didn't do it. But there's a handful of Republicans, conservatives that spent the last 4 years telling everybody else to shut up. Our guy won, take a hike. And so if that's been you, then that's not the right way to look at it either, because Trump is he's a celebrity, but presidents are not supposed to be our celebrity stars. They're leaders. And if you're going to say that, then if you hear it and you don't like it, welcome to the party, pal. It's not good to say on either side.
Guys, thank you for the conversation. Yep. I do have to leave, and I'm really sorry to do this too. Nope. I just had something come up that I've got to bail to. But
good luck, man. I'm glad you're feeling good. Talk to you later.
See you, Clay.
Eric, me and you'll keep talking if you're okay with that for a while.
So when I say let's talk about the stuff we can agree on, I don't mean agree right to left. I mean that most Americans can agree on in terms of what the actual numbers were related to this election. Before we get into the whole fight about the specifics of the allegations of voter fraud, let's just go back to some of those numbers I just talked about. So
Okay.
the Democrats saying that they won bigly, which is their new talking point, because they won by, what did I say a little while ago, about 7 million votes. Those 7 million votes, one way to look at it is they were all in California and New York. Once you look at the difference in those two states, which were going to go to Biden, even if the difference was 100,000 votes or 7 million votes, everybody started off this election putting those two states in the Biden column. There were a few people who said maybe California and New York could go to Trump if you actually did honest voting, and complained about the honest voting. But I think those states were going to go to Biden no matter what. Once you take those two out, you're talking about a difference of 280,000 votes. And if you take Michigan out of it, you're talking about a difference of 125,000 votes. And that 80,000 of that was in Pennsylvania. And then you got three states where the difference is 21,000, 12,000, and 11,000. So that close of an election. Now, let's be careful. We could talk about, again, how fraud might make a difference. Well, let's just talk about what actually happened with the process, changing the way that the votes came in by mail and how those are inherently flawed. So a little difference can make a big difference. And so the question that we can agree on is, well, what are some of the other things to look at to see what normally tells us whether one side would have won or not, and what were some of the statistics related to that, so we can kind of analyze where the Republicans need to go forward if they want to win more elections. Let's start with this one.
Okay.
African American vote normally runs about what?
For the Republicans?
What the Democrats usually get about what percentage of the African American
the Democrats usually get 90-something or 80-something%, I think. It's in the high.
This is kind of crucial. It's in the mid-90s. It's about 94, 95%. And a small change there with the size of that population makes a big difference, especially in key places.
What did we get this time? 12%?
We got something like 15% of African American males, and it was 89 to 90% went to Biden overall. That is still a significant change of African Americans who are willing to vote for Trump. And leaving aside the whole argument about the media and social media and everybody else trying to paint him as a racist, and the Black Lives Matter movement, all that stuff this summer was about painting him as a racist. Somehow he survived all that and actually increased the African American support for Republicans. Put a pin in this going forward for future conversations. What do Republicans have to do to maintain that support amongst African Americans? Was that something that was special for Trump because of his personality, or is that something the Republicans can keep going forward? Now let's look at the next interesting statistic about this election. Even with the results we have, no fraud allegations at all, what percentage of the Hispanic vote went to Donald Trump?
Golly, 18, 20?
35%.
Wow. See, for some reason, I thought he got 20%. Wow.
35% of the Hispanic vote. And people have been talking about for a while, well, the Democrats are always going to win every election from now on, and we should just expect it because the United States is no longer going to be majority white people. Well, I really reject that. And I reject that big time, because I think it doesn't matter what color your skin is. The longer your family lives in the United States, the more you have an opportunity to take an opportunity of the American dream. Until the American dream is shut down, it doesn't matter what color your skin is. Most people over time go from being poor when they first immigrate to being lower middle class to middle class, and eventually after a generation or two, sometimes first generation, sometimes 2 or 3 generations. Some, like my family, took 4 generations to get to the point where most people in the family were college educated and were professionals. Go back a generation. My dad was the first one in his family to go to college, and all 9 of his brothers and sisters grew up working in wheat fields and working cutting lumber and doing manual labor and scratching out a living. Well, that's what happens with most families that come to America. And over time, what happens when people have been here multiple years, as they become more successful, as they become bought into the American dream, they're more likely to vote Republican. And it doesn't matter whether you're brown or black, Hispanic, Latin, whatever it is. I think that makes a difference. And we're starting to see that in America. We saw that with the Italians and the Irish. We saw that with other generations in the past. Indian Americans from India are also very likely to be conservative. There's a different dynamic going on with African Americans that we can talk about, why they still are majority Democrat. But it's just because the color of your skin should not be used by one party to say, hey, you have to vote for us or you should vote for us.
Well, and real quick, that's where Biden had the comment about when he was comparing Hispanics to African Americans before the election, which got very little play, when he said, Hispanics, they're not like the African Americans. They have different perspectives.
But
and
they
thoughts.
have minds of their own as opposed
Basically.
to black people is basically what he said. And one of the most racist comments I've ever heard. But that's okay. He's a Democrat.
It blew my mind when he said that, because I was thinking that's exactly what they've actually accused Donald Trump of trying to say.
Right.
And it blew my mind that he got away with that.
But it's okay because he's got a good heart, and we know that because he's a Democrat. So no matter how racist he is or what he says, we're going to forgive him, but we'll go twist other people's anyway.
So anyway, the numbers of the Hispanics. Yes, sir. Sorry.
So 35%. All right. Now here's another interesting statistic. Let's go back and look at the way some of these races came out. Ohio came out bigly in favor of Trump. So did Iowa. Historically, it's very rare for Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania to be dramatically different from Ohio and Iowa. Those are kind of bellwether states. So when they don't match up, something weird happened.
Right.
Now, what weird happened, we don't know yet. We can ask lots of questions, but that's something weird that happened. So another one, here's what's interesting. So when Barack Obama had all the enthusiasm in the world in 2008, he won 873 counties in the United States. Biden somehow won both the popular vote and the Electoral College the way the count stands now, and presumably it's going to stand because today's the day the Electoral College meets.
Yep.
He only won 524 counties in the United States. His representation in the United States went down. That's only 17% of the counties in the United States. Now, let's see if we can get it right from getting too seasick. We'll see how this shows up. I haven't played around with this yet.
Uh-oh, look at you.
Can you, let's see if we can get this.
No, we can see it, yeah. Go to your right a little bit. There you go.
Hang on, I'm going to turn this effing light off over here.
I've got a screen share option on this moving forward. If you'll send me the link, I can actually pull it up.
Can you see that pretty well right there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's just hold that there for a second. I just had to turn that light off. That is a map of the United States by county showing where Biden won versus Trump. 17% of the counties went for Biden. Yet somehow he got more votes for president of the United States than any person in history by 11 million.
Well, one of the kickbacks I've heard when I see these memes pop up where you have the reds and the blues and people post, this is where Biden won and they shouldn't control where all these red, one of the things that I've seen posted in response to that is, well, a lot of those areas, there's just land. It's not as populous. So if we're basing it off people, human beings, then of course, if you have more people living in a big city that vote more Democrat on the Democrat ticket, that's where more people are. So the vote isn't for raw land. It's for, that's where the people are. And that's one of the pushbacks I've seen on these memes. They go, that doesn't matter because you're showing it's red in a place where there's 1,000 people versus blue where there's, 200,000 people. Does that make sense?
It does. One point of that is that it also has to do with where you're from and the demographic representation, and spreading out where people are from has always been an issue. And so, yeah, you do have people who are really like to vote Democrat concentrated in the big cities and highly populated areas, and that's what that map shows. But it doesn't answer the question of how Barack Obama won 873 counties. Biden only won 524, only 17% of the counties in the United States he won, yet he got way more votes than Barack Obama.
Well, and this may be the hard thing for conservatives to hear. Let's say we go through, we vet this election and we get it our way. We get it down to where we figure out what really went on, what we think there was fraud. If by some chance, and this is where my conservative friends may dislike what I'm about to say, if it's even close and Biden only won by 1 million votes, only one, it is possible that the pushback Trump had against a certain section of the United States was a lot like the pushback we gave against Hillary Clinton. It is possible that he just turned off enough people that went out to vote and they may not have voted down the line. They just said, I'm voting that guy out because I don't like him. And it could be based off the media bias. It could be based off, just bad thinking. And we may assume that, but it is possible they just pushed back against Trump too. That is a possibility.
I think that's a very fair point. That's a crucial part of this analysis. And that's why I think the questions we should be asking, and why I get so mad, you heard me earlier getting mad at people saying don't ask questions, is we as Republicans or conservatives need to be asking ourselves the questions. Do we have a fair chance to win? And if we are playing by the rules that have been set, what do we need to do to make sure the rules aren't changed in a way that unfairly hurts our chances? So if the Democrats are going to go in at the last minute and change the absentee ballot rules to make them looser, that more can come in, that more get counted, that you can't do an audit trail, that a number of mail-in ballots goes up dramatically, if that ultimately results in more people voting Democratic, how do we as Republicans, or how does the Republican Party get out there and play that ground game to start making sure the rules do things like, okay, we can have more mail-in ballots, especially during a pandemic, but we've got to have the verification process be more secure, not less secure. That we can't have people voting in two different states, that we can't have people voting after Election Day once they see the totals. That if a ballot comes in that doesn't have a crease in it, that wasn't folded over to be in the envelope, or even better, 8,000 of them that all are printed with ink that looks suspiciously like it was pre-printed only for Biden, and there's no crease in it. How do we ensure those kind of things can't happen? But even without the voter fraud, just looking at what happened in Georgia, where 6% of the votes were rejected last election, and this time it was 0.5%.
With more mail-in ballots.
Of mail-in ballots. Why did that change? How did that change? And where the heck were the Republican people who are the leaders working the Republican Party who should have been on the ground ensuring that the rules weren't changed that way? And maybe one answer is it's hard to keep up with the other side when they keep moving that fast, but we can't let that happen anymore. And in highly Democratic areas, we've got to go in, we being the Republicans, the conservatives, have got to go in ahead of time and get court orders to ensure that they have fair access to oversee the election process, that you can't just have only Democrats counting votes, only Democrats observing the votes, that people are kicked out of the rooms. Leaving aside lying to them and saying that there was a water main that was broken, so we're done counting for the night. Oh, okay, well, we'll see you in the morning. Okay, then let's go pull the ballots out from under the table. That kind of stuff happened. We know that happened because we saw the video and we've seen the affidavits. But even without that, the rules just can't be set up in such a way that the Republicans don't have a fair chance to observe the mail-in ballots coming in and making sure they're counted properly. And that's, leaving aside actual fraud, just the possibility of fraud is why Americans, I think, have a lot of questions.
Well, and it goes back to what we're saying, and I don't mind hammering this theme home. The fact that even if all that's legit, let's say there was a water line problem, let's say that the ballots weren't fraudulent, they just were being counted, and we just happened to see it this time because media coverage is way more than it was 15, 20 years ago. Yes, all of it, let's say all of it's true. The fact that we're asking does not mean we're trying to steal the election. The fact that we're asking is actually the responsible thing to do. And I guarantee you, if it was reversed, you would be doing the same thing and asking the questions. And if you're somebody that's telling everybody to shut up and quit asking questions without getting solid answers, you're part of the problem. Asking the questions is not the problem. The answers may be legit, but the fact that Eric and Clint and other people want to know the answers is not the problem. And one of the things that I think Republicans or conservatives can do better, Eric, we said this a couple of times, is take the lessons that we learned from Trump, the good stuff, what he did as far as policies, what he did behind the scenes for all of the things that his list of achievements that we like. The peace in the Middle East, I think, was the fourth deal he just put together late last week. The things that we saw that we like, pull that, extract that, and learn how to tell that story to people, minus the abrasive side. We got to find somebody that knows how to fight back against the media without turning off 20 to 30% of the American people who may disagree with him. That's the magic area we've got to find as conservatives, because the story is good. We just have to learn how to tell the story better.
How do we find someone who did not come up through the ranks as a politician, doesn't act like a politician, is willing to be a street fighter, but is nice about it?
Yes, that's what I'm saying we need. Absolutely. Well, and listen.
And his name was Ronald Reagan.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes,
now, where do we find another one of those? Arnold Schwarzenegger can't do it because he was born in a foreign country, so he's not a natural-born U.S. citizen. This is another podcast that we should be doing once things settle down. is let's start as soon as we can after inauguration and start asking the questions: who's going to be the candidate in 2024 for the Republicans, and what should he or she be focused on? We can save that for some future episodes, but for now, I think the big question is, what are those issues that we've had with this election that are fair questions to ask, and what do we need to expect of our leaders to address those election problems so that we have faith in the election? And asking the reasonable questions without even any allegations of voter fraud. How did Joe Biden get 11, almost 12 million more votes than the most popular president in American history, Barack Obama, campaigning from his basement when his whole campaign was, "I'm not Donald Trump"? And he did that without having any coattails, because the House seats increased for the Republicans. All 27 close House races went to the Republicans. So he had no down ballot coattails there.
And Obama didn't support it until the very end.
He got fewer African American votes. He got much fewer Hispanic votes. He won a fewer number of counties. How did it happen that he won anyway? And by the way, the mathematical answer to that is he got a lot more mail-in ballots from the African American Democrat voters in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. How did that happen? And let's assume no fraud. How do Republicans make up for that by getting enough votes in from other places? Or are the Republicans just never going to win another national election because the ballots coming out of those places are there's just so many that we can't win?
If we don't put a place in to check them, they'll figure out like, oh, we need an extra X number of ballots and we can go get it. And that's the fraudulent way to look at it. I'm not saying that's what happened, but let me ask you these three questions. It might be a good way to give you some platforms as we start wrapping up the conversation. One, I would ask some of my friends that live in the big cities that have the historically 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of democratically ran cities run by Democrats. If the crime rates are up, poverty's up, if things are not going the way you want them to do, why would my friends keep voting the same way? I don't get that part of it. I don't get when you can look at some of the stuff that's gone on the last 4 years for different demographics in the United States, how it seems to have gone more positive. I don't understand how that seems to have been overlooked. And based off the numbers you're telling me, I don't think it has been overlooked. I just think it's been overlooked by the media, but not by the people that it's impacting, because we've gained ground in some of those key demographics. But something about what the Democrats have been saying, if they get their way, that scare me. And then, and I'm going to write this down. And then something about the media, and I'll let you jump off on these topics. And I don't want to get off without talking about the media, so don't let me forget. But here's what I've heard: if everything goes towards the Democrats, and this is what I've said it earlier, but I want to say it very succinctly now, that we're going to give amnesty to, 11 million immigrants. And again, I'm a conservative. I'm a big believer in, if you've been here long enough, we should find a way to make you become a citizen and streamline that. Because if you've been here and contributing and you've got family and you're a good person, let's do it. If you're here illegally, you're doing bad stuff, get rid of you, go on. We don't need you here. Send you back wherever you came from. I don't care if you come from Ireland. I don't care where that is. So I'm not the guy that thinks that you just got to send back however many illegal aliens that are here, illegal immigrants that are here. I'm the guy that thinks we have a plan in place. It's possible we have a plan in place. But if you give a huge segment of just amnesty with no vetting process, that's a way to increase your voting base, because that's what's going to happen. They've also said they consider packing the Supreme Court. Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., possibility. I know there's processes for all this, but these are going to be topics for discussion that scare me as far as becoming states, getting rid of the filibuster, removing all student loans. Well, there's going to be a huge voting base right there. Bringing back a version of Obamacare, the gun confiscation. These are big rocks that you're putting into a wheelbarrow that you're wanting the American people to push forward. And I don't know if even Democrats who say they're more middle of the line have thought about the implications of those things. So there's my rant on that. I'll go to the media in a minute. What is your feeling on that? Is that's why we do this, right?
There's a lot of issues that I think are extremely divisive, that you just went through a good list of them, that Americans are not going to agree on. And it seems like that the Democrats are threatening to do all those things with what may be a very minor majority, barely winning the White House. Don't tell me he won bigly when the difference in the key states was less than 300,000 Americans, and in 2 states it was less than 120, and 4 states was less than 125,000. It was a damn close election. He got more votes. Trump got more votes than any other American president in the past. Biden happened to get even more votes. Good for him. He wins the Electoral College. He becomes president, but he does not have this giant mandate. He only won 17% of counties. So going in and saying, well, I got this giant mandate, so I'm going to do all this radical left-wing stuff. No, he doesn't have that. They lost seat. The Democrats lost seats in the House. It's getting close to being 50-50. It's not going to be. The Democrats are still going to control the House, but the Republicans made gains. So don't tell me that these are popular ideas with the American people. And we'll see what happens in Georgia. Newt Gingrich said we got to get enough Republicans to vote in Georgia so it overcomes the potential of fraud. It's going to be close. We'll see what happens. And effectively, if the Democrats win both those seats, it's 50-50 in the Senate, and the vice president's going to be the deciding vote. And they're going to control that barely, like literally barely. Everybody has to show up every time there's an important vote. And then the vice president's going to have to come in and make the deciding vote. But that means they're going to get to pick the committees and pick the leadership and set the rules and all that kind of stuff. It's just going to be very interesting. But it doesn't mean they have a giant mandate to go turn America hard left. But when they try to do, which is what they're threatening to do, Americans are going to have to find a way to fight back. And it'll be interesting to see where moderate Democrats come out on some of these issues. And the big complaint we've heard about Trump for the last 4 years is that he was doing stuff that he didn't have the mandate to do because Americans, quote, didn't support him. And that was one of the big criticisms, is he didn't have a supermajority backing all of what he wanted to do. And somehow that was horribly bad. But now that the Democrats barely have enough to be in charge, they're going to take Georgia, then they're going to change America, they're going to change the world. That's what they want to do. And while they have they're not afraid to use the power when they have it. And that's what we've got to fight against.
Yeah. And it may not have had a mandate, but I would challenge before COVID to ask any of those demographic categories if their life wasn't better. You know, one of the big things that came out before the election was the annual survey that says, is your life better than it was the last time they did the survey? It's been around forever. And majority of Americans said yes, and basically all demographics. And I remember the news, even CNN read it, were like, we cannot believe this. We wonder how they're taking this survey. They started questioning the survey instead of believing that most Americans pre-COVID, even this was actually before the election, even in the midst of COVID, most Americans had thought their lives were better than it was a year or 4 years ago. The last thing I want to give you a jumping off point is, this is something we've touched on, and we talked a little bit about it with Brandon Lewis. But if you want to talk in my world, I used to kind of shy away from this because I've got so many friends in the media world, and I operate in that sphere very littly. There you go, littly, smally in that world. But if you want to talk about influence in election, look to your media, in my opinion. And here's why. The Hunter Biden story was out there for months. Nothing on the major news. And if it did, it was always with an asterisk. This is the Republicans pouncing on things. They're trying to make hay. They were trying to separate.
There were literally people saying that it was Russian propaganda.
Oh, I get it.
It was Russian propaganda before the election, but then after the election, now all of a sudden it's mainstream news.
Amazing how it hits the news now. Look at the Ukraine. They accused Trump of doing something, and it turns out that Biden has we have more of a case for the quid pro quo for Biden than we ever did Trump. You screamed 4 years about Russia. We find out that Russia had very little to do with anything as far as Trump's involvement with it. As a matter of fact, it looks like there was some improprieties from the other side looking into the Trump's team. You look at you see the media saying there's all this diversity from the Biden team. Trump has had had diversity. And by the way, side note, diversity for diversity's sake is worthless. The only time diversity matters if it's a diversity of thought, not diversity of looks. Because if I'm going to hire people based only on how they look, that's one thing. Now, it is possible that how someone's look, their race, where they're from, their ethnicity, with perspective, they may make a good fit. But if your only qualifying factor is you look different than me, so I'm going to hire you, but you may have horrible ideas. You may not be a team player. You may not have the good interest of people in heart. That's a terrible rule of thumb. And now I'm watching the media, and it's not just a few. I've seen quite a few on these national talk show opinion shows, and they are throwing all of Trump voters into this big giant basket of deplorables, going back and using the word from 4 or 5 years ago. And if you want to know how an election gets manipulated, that's not even the social media side. In my world, look to your media for manipulating this election a little bit. That's my rant on the media, sir. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, let me add just a tiny smidge. I think there's about to be, amongst other things, maybe it's already on, it probably is already ongoing, an internal war in journalism and in the media. Is it the job of the journalists in America or the media to be independent and to be objective and to be fair? That used to be what they taught in journalism school. I just read an article this morning that a professor at Stanford, the Harvard of the West Coast, who taught the journalism, teaches in the journalism school there now, teaches journalism to Stanford students, that it is bad as a media person to be objective. Because if you're objective, you cannot not advance social justice agendas. In other words, the truth and facts are not working for us. We need to stop using truth and facts. And it is your job, if you're a journalist, if you're in the media, to manipulate a public opinion without using objective facts as your base. That's something somebody's actually teaching in the Stanford School of Journalism. Yeah. So what's going to happen in our media going forward? We are going to have more and more left-wing media who thinks that their job is to be manipulative. It's going to be propaganda. Now, does that happen on the right too? Sure. But I think it's fair to say, are openly offering opinions, not suggesting that they are a news source. And I think what's happened is Americans have also come to realize in the middle of all this, what's happened this year is it's unmasked the fact that there is no such thing as objective media anymore. You have to go to foreign countries like Great Britain or the Netherlands or Australia to find newspaper sources that are willing to cover certain stories in a way that's somewhat objective. It's just, it's beyond frustrating. The right-wing news sources are becoming more and more numerous to match up with what's going on the left, but right now they have smaller access to the public. They're not the main networks that are being carried on TV. But they're on the internet, and then you have things like YouTube taking down anything that is politically right wing. Well, how did we get to this age? This is what's scary. I'll just say it this way: are we entering into an age, even though it's the information age, that media is no longer objective, and that their job is propaganda and censorship? And tell me that doesn't feel like what's going on right now.
Yeah, it reminds me. I mean, I've said it before on these conversations. The book and the movie 1984. This is exactly where I think either it was prophetic. It feels like we're heading in that direction. And I'll say it. I think the media is starting to look like it feels to me. In other words, I feel like we're getting divided into very clear and more than ever lines. It's our team. We're not going to hold our team accountable, but we're going to hold your team accountable to standards we don't hold our team accountable to. Both sides are saying that. It's Red Rover, Red Rover. And I'm going to, if I believe in this science, these are my statistics. If you don't agree with me, you just don't believe in science. Even though the conversation around science, that's how science evolves, is the same way we were talking about, asking questions and validating things. It's not just, here's my science, now you shut up. Or here's my opinion, you shut up. I think the media is going to end up becoming, this is your conservative outlets, these are your liberal outlets, and the truth, and we are lazy people now. I think the truth is going to be somewhere, probably a little bit of both. And we're going to end up, I think, going to be in silos. If we are not careful, we're going to get lumped into the silos. And I almost feel like the cattle that go through the fences that are designed to put them into this big giant field, where even the field has fences around it that you feel free, but you only get to roam where they let you roam. And I feel that's what we're doing with media.
So I haven't given my commercial yet. Braver Angels, where I'm the Tennessee co-coordinator, is working hard to find ways for ordinary Americans to reach across the aisle, talk to each other. Doesn't mean we want to change each other's minds, but we want to have the conversations about civic empathy, patriotic empathy, and ensuring that Americans are still allowed to talk about all these things. And one of the things that we've had conversations about is that these silos of information, that the separate news feeds are probably the fact that we get our information from different places now and we don't all agree on the facts is probably the number one cause of polarization in America. And this is part of the problem. People who are conservatives that are paying attention are becoming more strident and stronger advocates for conservative ideas. People on the left are becoming more strident advocates for left-wing ideas, and they're not talking to each other. They're yelling at each other because they can't even agree on the facts, and trying to find middle ground to even have a conversation about what we can agree on is extremely difficult. It's a lot of hard work, and it's one reason I'm doing the volunteer work.
So what do you get out of the break conversation? Well, you froze up a little bit, and I thought you were done. I'm sorry. I was going to ask you though. So far, your involvement with the Braver Angels, has it been eye-opening for you? Has it been a very positive influence on you having these conversations, or is it frustrating?
Braver Angels is very interesting. It's been very eye-opening. It's a positive experience. One of the reasons it's not been that frustrating yet is that they work very hard to build a community of like-minded people. And like-minded doesn't mean all left or all right or all blue or all red. It means getting people that are blues and reds that are willing to get to know each other as people, to get to talk to each other, and work on how to go into workshops about how to recognize polarization and how to recognize that the other side is mostly not as extreme as what you're being told by your news feeds. It's extremely important to have those conversations and learn what the other side is thinking. One thing that I'm working on with Braver Angels, and one thing that I would advocate more, is we do need to have some more specific conversations about specific topics. But you got to put in the hard work first to get people to agree on the ground rules for discussing those conversations. So we're not going to just yell at each other, that you're not going to be told to shut up by the other side. And that's what Braver Angels is fighting against, that we should have a safe space to have those conversations in America. And by the way, that safe space is called the United States of America.
Thank you. I was shaking my head thinking,
yeah.
The heck are we having to create that? That gummit.
Yeah. But we're having to go back and do it within this organization to teach people that it's okay to have these conversations. And I don't want to have to go around telling people on the left that I disagree with their ideas so bad that they just need to shut up and be punished. But that's what they're saying going the other way. And I hear it both ways sometimes. At the end of the day, we got to be able to have a conversation. First of all, what facts are true and what can we do based on those facts? And are we going to stay together as a country?
And the fact that I may not agree with your take on a situation when you've shown facts doesn't mean that I don't think your facts are true. It just means we have to weigh the consequences of the decisions you make based off facts and the decision I may go, I think the consequences of these facts leading to a policy or procedure, those consequences to me are much more acceptable than your consequences. Now, how do we find that compromise that Clay was talking about? And I'll be honest, and I haven't thrown this word out, but I have seen people use it about other folks, either the Republicans who were signing off on the Texas lawsuit, people asking questions, because the word is traitor. I'm going to tell you something right now. You're throwing out, I've seen people called racist who aren't racist. I've seen people called Hitler who aren't Hitler. And if you're throwing out the word traitor and you're just using that to make the other side feel bad, and you're saying these traitors ought to be, you're the problem. You are a problem. And I'm not saying that to me blows me away. And I've said it every time we get on these conversations, how quick we are to tell other fellow Americans that disagree with us that you are the most evil thing that I can think of. You are Hitler. You supported Hitler. You are a racist. You don't like people based off how they look. You, sir, are a traitor to the country. You're willing to say that to me because I'm asking questions. I disagree with you on policy. So you're going to label you're a piece of shit. And it pisses me off. And I'm telling you, you probably wouldn't say it to somebody's face. You're only hiding behind your social media keyboard. And that kind of crap, tough guy keyboard crap, bothers me. And I'm not going to be a tough guy in any case. But if you can't have conversation without being labeled, to me, that is a you problem. And I got no time for it. I don't have to accept those labels. And you need to go read some history books.
Can we agree that once the epidemic has calmed down enough that we can safely exercise together, that one of the things we'll do is get our favorite liberal friends and get our boxing gear on and go in the ring down at the Y Cap and we'll stand in our corners and argue politics until you get to the point where you get so mad at each other that you can't stand it anymore, and then somebody rings the bell and we're allowed to go at it and solve the problem.
I'm old. I got a lot of Democrats who are tough guys. I'll get my ass whipped. I'm a tough guy, keyboard guy. I'm looking at the camera right now, but no, I see your point. I get it. Yeah.
And that's apparently how we're going to settle these arguments going forward, because neither side, it's hard work to have a conversation with the other side, and it's too easy to get mad and angry. And there's stuff that I have a limit on, though. There's stuff that if you go too far on that side, you said not to use the word traitor. What is the right word for somebody who cheats in an election?
No, but what I'm saying is, if you find out that somebody has done traitorous stuff, I'm okay with that. It's my thing of like when I see people posted the Texas AO, whoever the Texas the Attorney General, whoever filed the lawsuit for Texas, that guy's a traitor. That guy.
The Pennsylvania Attorney General called it seditious because you're not allowed to have this conversation.
Right, but the Pennsylvania guy can say that Trump's never going to win the election beforehand, and we're not supposed not to bring that crap up. It drives. That's the hypocrisy when the media focus does this. Everybody, look over here. Don't pay attention to this. Look over here.
Let's just keep this one simple rule. If you're trying to tell the other side to shut up, that means you don't have the facts or the logic to support your argument.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I'm getting to a point now when I start seeing people label people things, I'm going to start asking people based off what? Why are you calling that person this? Why are you calling that person? Why are you labeling them that? Why are you assigning them this characteristic when it's a Facebook thing based off one vote they made or one comment they made? And I'm not telling you there's not evil out there. And if they are, me and you will go fight them together. And if you're a Democrat, I don't care. I'll stand by your side and fight evil with you all day long. But you're going to have to start proving to me that your default, easy-minded, lazy-ass arguments of labeling me because I disagree with you on policy, that you've got something other than I'm right, you're wrong, we won. If that's your basis of it, you can go not good things. There we go.
Let's invite him down to the White Cap.
You're wanting to get my ass whipped. That's what it is. All right.
I'll actually want to get in the ring with you because you and I never got a chance to do that.
Yeah, listen, I'm all for it. I
was in great shape 2 years ago doing that with Mark Smith.
Yeah.
I just need to get. I mean, I loved it. I boxed in college for a class. I took the PE class. I boxed in the Navy. It was something they made us do early in flight school during the ground part. And then I got back and I did about 4 years of it here in Chattanooga. I wish
it's great therapy. I'll be honest with you.
I need to get back into shape to do it, though. Since all this stuff happened I've been eating my stress a little bit too much, and my fat ass doesn't need to be doing that.
Well, I was heading down that raid, and then I took a left turn at Albuquerque because I became the boy in the bubble, and I have nothing else to do all day, so I just go do that kind of stuff and work a little bit. All right, hey, let's wrap this conversation up. I'll throw it out there to you again, maybe the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. I would love to get one of your Braver Angels folks on with us, even if it's not a Democrat, to have a conversation around differing views, someone to talk more about Braver Angels even. I just think it would be good to hear a different perspective and get a different face on these videos.
That would be awesome. If you think about, send me an email invite with that description, and I will talk to some people at Braver Angels to see who wants to go on with us.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to. It can be a special edition. It can be just a 15 or 20-minute one we do in the middle of the week. So let's look at that. All right. Thank you, Eric Buchanan.
Thank you, Clint. Sorry, Clay had to go early. See you guys. All right. Bye.